into rapturous details about my first hummus. But I thought, given this is Black History Month, I could take us back 25 years to the first National People of Color Environmental Justice Summit, in which groups from across the United States were kind of rising up in anger at the mostly white national organizations who often love trees and wildlife, and that's all terrific, but oftentimes forgot who are the people who suffer the worst ills in our society. And so I'd like you to think a little bit deeply today about how not only do we need to absorb everything we're gonna hear about tonight for our own health, to be conscious about the ill health that descends upon so many people of color communities because of a non-vegan lifestyle. The vast gatherings of concentrated animal feedlots. I worked for the National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences, and we birthed an environmental justice partnership grant program. And the grantees included people who were seeking to rally people in North Carolina who lived around hog farms. None of us can really feel the stench, the clouds of flies that prevent people from having their children play outside on swings or in their own gardens, because this is what was being demanded and controlled at the highest and worst capitalist corporate levels. So I don't want to get us dyspeptic, because we're going to hear how we can be so much better. But for me personally, I feel an obligation that part of our journey has to be acknowledging the people who serve well, but are abused in the larger agricultural system. Imagine the poor people working in slaughterhouses during COVID and being told, no, you can't take off from work. We need you to slaughter another 1 million chickens per day, or cows, or pigs. And there are whole communities who live in what at one point in time was considered rural communities, idealized in many people's minds, but not understanding how our concentrated animal consumptive corporate world really beleaguers them and their children. So it's part of my journey. I love my own individual journey towards my better diet. Could do a little bit better on the pure vegetable side of it, but I think I wanted to invoke Black History Month in particular and say there's larger justice issues that surrounds our journey together to a much more healthy and productive vegan lifestyle. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Jerry. Your compassion is just heartfelt in itself. And we know you live it every day. Your work is the Affordable Housing Council in Fairfax. So now I am delighted to introduce Dr. Vanita Rahman, a true powerhouse in medicine, nutrition, and fitness, and someone who's generously sharing her expertise with us tonight. This is her third visit to UCF. She's a very popular speaker. COVID interfered with her being here more frequently. But DC native Dr. Rahman is board certified internal and lifestyle medicine physician, certified nutritionist, and a personal trainer at the Barnard Medical Center, where she leads weight loss research and provides primary care with a focus on nutrition and lifestyle. She also teaches at George Washington University's School of Medicine. Before joining the Barnard Center, she practiced internal medicine for 15 years at Kaiser Permanente, where she launched a popular and successful plant-based weight loss program. She earned her undergraduate and medical degrees at UVA and did her training at the Washington Hospital Center. She is also author of several books on plant-based nutrition, including Simply Plant-Based, which inspired just about all of tonight's snacks, with swaps for the nuts. We're not allowed to have nuts, and this is a school for kids during the day. So beyond medicine, she loves traveling, exercising, experimenting with plant-based recipes, and spending time with family and friends. And her mom and husband are here tonight with her. Her philosophy: while medicine saves lives, nutrition and lifestyle are key to preventing and managing disease. Please join me in warmly welcoming Anita Rahman.
Thank you, Loretta. It's so great to be here, and thank you all for coming out tonight. I know it's so cold. But I'm really excited about this talk. When Loretta mentioned this to me, I was really excited because this is not the kind of talk I get asked to do very often, but it's so important. So let's just jump right in and let's keep it very interactive. Feel free to raise your hand, ask questions, and we want this to feel like a conversation, okay? All right, next slide, please. All right, so pop quiz. Anyone know where this picture is taken?
Norway.
Norway? Any guesses?
China?
China?
No, French flags. Adirondacks.
Adirondack? So the photographer is right here. He took it. There's a little hint. The boat has a flag on it. Anyone know where that could be from? I know it's kind of twisted and you can't see it. Well, not to keep you in suspense much longer, nobody guessed it, but this is Canada. This is Lake Louise.
Oh.
Now, why do I have this picture of Lake Louise? What stands out to you about the picture? Do you notice anything about it? So yeah, there are glaciers there in the back. What else? Anybody notice anything odd about this picture?
The canoe's odd.
Hmm?
The canoe is odd,
The canoe is odd.
oddly shaped.
Well, it's hard to appreciate it, but you might almost think, what's wrong with the photographer's camera? It's like there is like a haze.
Oh, yeah.
Do you notice it's not crisp? The edges aren't popping. The colors, it's like someone just put a film on the camera lens. Well, there's a reason why this picture looks that way. So next slide, please. So this is what was happening in Canada at that time. This is 2018. We had planned this amazing trip to Vancouver, British Columbia. Always wanted to go there, couldn't wait to see it. And when we got there, there were wildfires with hazardous air quality levels. And when we got to Lake Louise, it's like everything just had this film, this haze. It's like you have to rub your eyes and say, like, what's going on? All right, next slide, please. Okay, so today we're going to talk about climate, nutrition, and our health, and how are they related. So next. So let's talk about animal agriculture next. And let's keep going. So animal agriculture leads to increased greenhouse gas emissions, next, which leads to climate change, next, and increased greenhouse gas emissions also lead to poor air quality, next. Both of these together lead to significant suffering and death, next. And then maybe this is the piece that sometimes gets lost, is animal food itself can lead to suffering and death. So they're all related. So let's break this down a little bit more. Next, please. Let's talk about greenhouse gases. What are these things? All right. So you can scroll down through the slide. So greenhouse gases, there are three of them. There are others, but these are the three main ones. There's carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide. Now, what these do is they trap the sun's heat in the atmosphere. So that's what a greenhouse does, right? It's a glass house. The sun or something heats it up, and then the heat gets trapped in there. So in essence, they're trapping the warmth within our atmosphere, creating a greenhouse effect. So that's making our planet warmer. And there's just a little bit more about them. How effectively they warm the earth depends on how well they absorb heat, how much of them are present, and how long they last in the atmosphere. Okay, so all three of these are playing a powerful role, right? So what does animal farming do for greenhouse gases? So let's look at that and see. So animal digestion produces methane. So, but maybe not in the way you're thinking. Most animals, they have a complex digestive system. They process and digest their food multiple times, especially sheep and cattle. And they burp a lot. And it's the burping that brings methane, and it creates a lot of greenhouse gas emissions. And then manure from animals emits greenhouse gases. Making animal feed, producing animal feed produces greenhouse gases. Next. And then whenever we clear the land for these animals to graze on, they need to eat, right? And so that produces greenhouse gases. So all four of these are leading to significant greenhouse gas emissions. Now, how much does agriculture contribute to greenhouse gases in the US? According to the EPA, or the Environmental Protection Agency, about 10% of greenhouse gas emissions in 2022 were due to agriculture. So this is going to be our focus today. Now, this is really interesting. Different foods produce different amounts of greenhouse gases. So you'll start to see a pattern. I'm going to show you a couple of these slides. This is kilograms of greenhouse gases produced per kilogram of food produced. So you see a pattern. Look at the highest one, beef. And that's because cattle, they digest their food. We have one gut, they have 4 guts. They have to digest 4 times. They just burp all day, and there's tons of gas coming out of them. That's just their biology. They can't help it, but it's contributing a lot. So for each kilogram of beef, 70 kilograms of greenhouse gases are produced. And then you can see with animal foods, lamb, shellfish, cheese, and look how low it is when you start to look at nuts or vegetables, fruit, legumes, tofu, so really low amounts. Next slide, please. Now maybe this will be more intuitive. So per 1,000 calories of food that we produce, how much greenhouse gases do we produce? So again, we see that with animal foods, it's significantly more. And then when you start to look at plant foods, it's far less. So plant foods are much more friendly for the environment. Next. Now let's talk about meat production and consumption. So I thought this was a really interesting graph. It's showing from 1961, the average consumption of meat per person per year was about 20 plus kilograms, maybe 24 kilograms. But look how it has increased. In 2021, it's doubled. So our human biology hasn't changed, but we're just consuming a lot more animal product. And this is, of course, contributing to climate change. Okay, next, please. Now, not all countries are contributing equally. So who's contributing the most? At the top is Portugal, of all places. Per capita meat consumption, so per year, per person in Portugal, 154 kilograms of meat consumption. US is not that far behind, 149, followed by Spain. And then the average around the world is 63. So we are really up there, you know? And then places like India, 14 kilograms, Ethiopia, even less, 7.7. All right, next slide. Now, this is interesting. This is another way to look at same data. You can see worldwide daily meat consumption. So this is every day per person in grams. You can see worldwide it has increased from 1961 to 2021. But look at the US. We started out so much higher and we continue to remain really high. So significant, you know, so the average American is now consuming about 350 grams of meat per day. All right, now, again, how much does this cost the environment? So this is a really busy graphic, but let me break it down for you. So first, let's look at land use. Look at the different types of milks. This is comparing different milks, dairy milk versus all the plant-based milks. Look at dairy milk. 8.95 square meter of land is needed per liter of milk. Compare that to oat or soy, you know, much, much lower. Greenhouse gas emissions, a lot more with dairy milk compared to plant-based milks. Fresh water use, a big resource. So a lot more usage with dairy milk. And the last one, okay, who's heard of eutrophication? Oh, okay, so some of you, all right. So this is one of the spelling bee words. So what this means is when you have animal farming or any kind of farming, the runoff from the field goes into natural bodies of water. It changes the chemistry of that water, if you will, and that can cause damage to the animals that live in that water. It also changes the types of plants that are now part of that water system. So you can see that damage to our water sources is much greater with dairy milk than with plant-based milks. Now all this data is online. It's from an organization called ourworldindata.org, which is from the UK. So they've been tracking this. Next slide, please. All right, now animal feed. This is a big resource. Look at how much animal feed is required to produce 1 kilogram of meat or dairy product. So to produce, and this is mind-boggling, right? To produce 1 kilogram of beef, we need 25 kilograms of animal feed. And then to produce lamb, 15 kilograms. So it goes down with certain things, but still it's significant. All right, now this one is really hard to wrap your head around. This is the number of animals that were slaughtered for meat in the US in 2022. And 34 million cattle, 125 million pigs. I didn't know, but 208 million turkeys. For a meat that nobody really likes, everybody complains about it, right? But yeah, that's a lot of turkeys that are slaughtered. 2 million sheep, 607,000 goats, but perhaps the largest number, 9.5 billion chickens. That's in 1 year. And 26 million ducks. So, you know, it's mind-boggling, and this is just in the US. This is not even looking at the rest of the world. Okay, next slide, please. So let's talk about climate change. So what do greenhouse gases do to our climate? Well, next, please. So they're warming the planet. And what this does is it leads to more frequent and intense natural disasters. So it's not a coincidence So next slide, please. So greenhouse gases warming the planet, and this is leading to more natural disasters. So what kind of natural disasters? Can you all think of some?
Hurricanes.
Hurricanes,
Tornadoes.
Tornadoes.
Floods.
mudslides,
Fires.
fires, wildfires. We just saw this in LA, right?
Yeah.
Southern California. What
Flooding,
yeah. The precipitation levels are changing. Yeah. So you think you've hit on most of these. Let's keep going. What droughts? Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, just everything is more intense, more frequent, and this causes a lot of human suffering and unnecessary death, right? Next, please. All right, now air quality. This is something, sometimes climate change feels oh so out there. That's the West Coast. This is not happening to us on the East Coast. Maybe the worst thing that's happening to us is we're just not getting much snow anymore or something like that. It can feel very remote. But actually, air quality impacts all of us, and it's happening to all of us. So let's talk about air quality index. Air quality index is a measurement of how clean the air is around us. And the measurement takes into account 5 things. It takes into account the amount of ozone at the ground level. It takes into account PM10 and PM2.5. How many people are familiar with these? Okay, so some of you. I'll get into that a little bit. And then carbon monoxide, sulfur dioxide, and nitrogen dioxide. So what are these PM10s and PM2.5? Next slide, please. So the PM stands for particulate matter, and the number refers to their diameter in micrometers. So PM2.5 are just about the smallest particles. They're very, very tiny. We can't see them at all without an electron microscope. Now, these are really problematic because they're so tiny. We easily inhale them, they get into our bloodstream, and they cause all sorts of damage. So what are the sources of these? Power plants, industrial mechanisms, vehicles, wood burning, forest fires. That's why in Vancouver, that air quality was off the chart. And now in California, we've seen, I think, was it last summer or summer before it was last summer, wasn't it? We had really poor air quality on some days in DC. It's because it was making its way.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so forest fires and other combustible processes. Now, PM10 particles are a little bit bigger. Their diameter is smaller than the width of a human hair. So still pretty tiny, but they're also very damaging. And again, industrial operations, agriculture, all produce these. Now, what are the health risks of both of these? So there's short-term risk and long-term risk. So they can cause short-term, they may cause cough, wheezing, people with asthma may have trouble breathing. They can aggravate asthma, COPD, they increase our risk for infection, and then cardiovascular disease, higher rates of heart attacks, arrhythmias, and early death. When we were in Vancouver and that air quality was over 500, I had a low-grade fever the whole week, and I was using my inhaler, and it was the air quality. There's no 2 ways about it. I wasn't sick. It was just inflammation happening in the body. That's how quickly it happens. And I remember before going, I was telling my neighbor, I said, I'm so excited to go there and breathe that amazing air that they have. And then boom. Next slide, please. Next. So air pollution can lead to inflammation and damage throughout our body, virtually all over our body. And this increases the risk for stroke, increases the risk for heart disease like heart attacks, arrhythmias, sudden cardiac death, poor heart function, lung disease, not just asthma and COPD, but there's evidence that The mortality from lung cancer increases, people don't heal as well from infections. And in fact, if you look at data, and I didn't put it here, but if you look at data from the SARS, do you remember the SARS pandemic we had? And then we had the COVID pandemic. Well, during both of those, research showed that poor air quality contributed significantly to death. That was something that didn't make the headlines. You know, there were always comorbidities, but there was another issue that was the air quality that was contributing. And then this all leads to death. Next slide. So how significant is this? This is hugely significant. So look at these numbers. Around the world in 2021, let's look at different diseases. So COPD is a chronic lung disease that people who smoke may get, but not everyone who smokes gets it, and not everyone who has it has smoked. But usually something we see in heavy smokers. But about 40% of the deaths due to COPD were due to poor air quality. Imagine that, about half. About a quarter of the deaths from heart disease were due to poor air quality. Diabetes, about 1 in 5 deaths were due to poor air quality. And then stroke, a quarter of the deaths were due to poor air quality. And lung cancer, about, again, 1 in 5 deaths due to poor air quality. So this is a huge problem. Next slide, please. Next slide. And globally, 1 out of 8 deaths are due to air pollution. Just imagine 1 out of 8. Now, so this is Shanghai, another trip we went on, and it was actually December, Christmas time, when air quality really reaches hazardous levels in China. And you know, I didn't know this before going there, but you can't breathe. People walk around with these N95 respirators, you know, long before COVID, people were doing this in China. This is Shanghai, which actually had the cleanest air in China, and you can see that haze. And once you've been to a few of these cities, you can look at this haze and say, oh, I think the air quality index is not good today. And depending on how thick it is, the worse it is. At first, it tricks you. You think, oh, well, it's fog. No, it's not fog, it's smog. So these buildings, again, there's like a haze. They're just not crisp at all. Next slide, please. So now we can all pay attention to the air quality index. How many of you have looked at the air quality index? All right, great. So there's the scale. So green is 0 to 50, meaning the air quality is good, it's safe to go out, to exercise. Then it gets progressively worse. And then when you're getting to 500, it looks awful. We were traveling through China when there was a city, Xi'an. We were taking the train from there to Beijing, and we went through this one region where it looked like death. It was like thick, gray, smoke, smog, and it was the middle of the day. It just looked, someone took like coal dust and sprayed it all over the city. And the air quality was off the charts. It wasn't even measurable. It's over 1100. So this, a lot of this feels very far from us until it happens to us. And do you remember how high the numbers got when we had last summer?
It's hazardous.
I have, I think it was about a year ago, maybe January 2024. I think there were wildfires in Canada, and I bought a big air purifier. It read the particulate matter, I think it's the 2.5. It was 250.
Yeah, that's,
And after those fires were gone, ever since it's been 001.
yeah.
So it was 250 in there.
And imagine that. I mean, think how far that is, and think of how far it's made its way, and imagine what it's like for the people living there. So this is close. This is affecting all of us. So climate change sometimes feels very distant, but air quality is all around us. Do you want to add something?
Yeah, I have an app on my Android phone. It's probably available for iOS. It's by EPA. It's called Air Now. and here's the current air quality here.
what is it?
It's 35, it's good.
That's great. Well, it's funny you bring that up because next slide, please. There you go. You can go. You can go this-
Yeah, it's an.
It's an app and you can also go to the website and just type in the zip code or the city that you're in or that you want to visit and get an idea. I mean, things are so bad now that when you travel, you have to consider this. Do you really want to go to the West Coast in the summer when wildfire season is raging? Do you really want to go to Asia in the winter when air quality is awful? And you know, on the East Coast, we're somewhat insulated, but as we saw last summer, maybe not so much anymore. So, but there's another way to quickly get the air quality index. Anyone know what that is?
Around.
Well, does anyone have a smartphone? Okay, now I have to confess, I only know an iPhone, but on the iPhone, if you go to the weather app, it will tell you what your air quality is right now where you are. It will also tell you the air quality of any city that you add to your weather app. So anyone want to tell us, is it matching?
It's 32, it's good.
Yeah, so 32 and 35, so they're both correlating, right?
Well, that's in Oakton.
Yeah,
That's where we are now.
yeah. So this is really easy. So you can
Yeah.
look at the air quality index, you know, very helpful information. So what's the solution to this crisis we're facing, you know? Well, at the Physicians Committee, we've developed something called the Power Plate. So this is really great. It looks a little, I mean, and I really want to clarify, we came up with this before the USDA came up with it. But, so the Power Plate is so easy. It's 4 food groups. So fruits, vegetables, legumes, and grain. I mean, how easy is that? And you just pick and choose. Yeah,
Well, part of the reason the USDA came up with that is because of PCRI.
I hope so. But they made one tiny mistake when they did that,
Yeah,
right?
put dairy on.
Yeah, they put dairy there and we'd say, just take that off and put water. So this is super easy to follow. So whenever you're putting your meal together, you just think, okay, what do I want to pull up from these 4 food groups? Next slide, please. So why eat plant-based? Well, we just talked about how it reduces greenhouse gas emissions. So it's healthier for the planet. It's obviously more ethical for the animals, less slaughtering, right? That goes without saying. But it's also good for us. Almost every organ system benefits from plant foods, okay? So let's just go head to toe. Less risk of dementia, fatigue, anxiety, depression, less heart disease, less liver disease, kidney disease, eczema, skin health improves, acne improves, gut health improves, better reproductive health, you know, for women, polycystic ovary disease improves, their fertility improves. And for men, erectile dysfunction improves. That usually gets their attention. Until then, they're like, whatever. And then joint pain improves. Nerve disease improves, vascular health improves. So just almost every part of our body benefits. The risk is that much lower. Now, how important is it that we change the way we eat? Extremely important. So this is a big report that was done by leading scientific experts from around the world. It was called the Eat Lancet Commission that got together. They looked at our pattern of agriculture, our food supply, and they said, and just look at so I just took some of the quotes in there. In their conclusion, they said, food is currently threatening both the people and the planet. So imagine food is supposed to nourish us, but it's actually becoming a threat. Unhealthy diets now pose a greater risk to suffering and death than unsafe sex, alcohol, drug, and tobacco use combined. So that's how big of a problem it's become. And they said a radical transformation of the global food system is needed, and that's Dr. Walter Willett from Harvard School of Public Health. And he goes on to say, we need to transformation to healthy diets by 2050 will require substantial dietary shift. Global consumption of fruits, vegetables, nuts, and legumes will have to double, and consumption of foods such as red meat and sugar will have to be reduced by more than 50%. A diet rich in plant-based foods and with fewer animal source foods confers both improved health and environmental benefits. So this is not a person's opinion or an organization's opinion. This is just consensus around the world. Next slide, please. So this is what they recommend our food plate look like. So mostly fruits and vegetables, whole grains, and they add very little space in there for animal product. This is what is sustainable for the planet. So the less animal product we have, the better off we are. Now, of course, we don't need that animal product at all on our plate. I do want to emphasize that. Next slide. So just to sum it up, plant-based diets are healthy for human health, and we didn't go into all the details of that today, but they're obviously better for the environment, which is better for us ultimately. It's better for the animals that we share the planet with. And a new one is about athletic performance. So some people really want to up their game. A lot of athletes are eating plant-based because it reduces inflammation. They perform better, they recover more quickly. Next. Now I just want to play this video for you. This is a patient of mine. This is also a participant who took who participated in our group weight loss program. It's one thing to stand here and talk to you about what plant-based diets can do, but I just want to share Mary's story with you because it's so powerful. And no one says it better than she can. I think when you say share, you just have to say it.
Speaker.
No.
Get anything at all.
Bring back. I gotta catch it first.
We go back and then come back and.
Yeah, maybe go to the previous slide. There we go.
All right, let's see. Yeah, let's see if this will work. Oh, no, it doesn't want to play at all. I can put the link in.
No sound.
Stop sharing.
Oh, I got it.
While we're waiting for that, I was wondering, those slides where you showed cows versus poultry, and poultry being 95% of all the animals are killed for food. Something like that. And it showed there were 2 or 3 slides, I think it showed the environmental climate change effects. And was that per cow and per chicken, or
Let's,
as an aggregate? Because there are far fewer cows emit a lot more methane,
Right.
but there's far fewer cows killed.
Let's
Okay.
go back to the slide and see, because there was,
Yeah.
they were shown in different ways, so I wanna
Yeah,
make
so
sure
I'm
I'm
just wondering,
understanding the
As
question.
an aggregate, all the cows versus all the chickens,
So
Yeah.
more,
which one produces more methane than carbon dioxide?
oh, so there are more chickens slaughtered than cows. However, cows produce a lot more methane than chickens do.
Per cow and per chicken.
Aggregate,
But because
aggregate.
it's
No,
aggregate.
yeah, because, yes, and also there was that other slide that showed per kilogram of food produced. And per 1,000 kilocalories of food produced. Cows are still gonna be higher, I believe, but I wanna look at the slide and make sure. Yeah,
You had mentioned that, you have these three gases that are caught up there. Why are they caught? Why aren't they continuing to just,
yeah, why don't they just leave our atmosphere?
right,
Yeah.
is it the ozone hole that all of a sudden we need now and it can go out there,
Yeah, well, that's just, that's just the chemistry, just they get trapped, they're in the Earth's atmosphere and then they trap the heat in the atmosphere with them. They're forming like a shield around our atmosphere.
But, so there's something, is it the gravity or something that will keep it in?
Yeah, I mean, I imagine it's more complex than that. It's
Yeah.
probably combination of their density, how they react with other things around them that keeps them trapped within our atmosphere. They do eventually leave our atmosphere, but they can take years and years to go away, and different ones leave at different rates.
And how are some scientists dealing with this? Are they coming up with something very, creative?
It's better to leave it to the people, just like, don't blame it on the scientists, that somehow they're gonna magically make it better. It's we, the people.
People, I really think that, so there must be trying different things. Are you aware of?
Well, I think there are different approaches being taken, so, some people are targeting agriculture, some people are targeting the transportation industry. Some people are targeting industrial productions, and some people are just saying none of this matters, just ignore it, it's not our problem right now, so there's so many different factors
I was
going into
thinking
it.
like the weather people or the people that are looking at our atmosphere and
I
thinking
think-
of how to change that.
I think
I've
they're just,
never heard anything.
yeah, they're
that
just
people-
ringing, they're just sounding the alarm bells and saying, we've got to change how this is produced. We can't change it once it's already there.
I just,
Trying to put particles in the air, in the atmosphere to reflect it's weird stuff that
Yeah,
they have.
but I think the bulk of it is that the slide I didn't shows all these greenhouse gases were relatively low until about 1960s. And then with the Industrial Revolution, they just spiked.
Right.
So it's really our industrial process that's contributing. And the way to tackling it is going to be to reduce that. We can't catch it and
Let me
filter
see.
it, if you will.
We'll see if this works now.
Okay.
to me that I could change everything in my life around and it would just take 3 months. I mean, it's crazy to think 30 years of a struggle and in 3 months, who can't do 3 months? My A1C was 12.7 when I was diagnosed on May 18th. And then in 3 months, it went to a 6.7. So I cut that in half. Just with food, with no medications at all. So I've lost 58 pounds in 6 months. When I was diagnosed, I was legally blind, and I regained my sight in 6 weeks to the point where I don't need glasses. My vision is better than it was before all of this started. I had terrible, debilitating migraines, and they're gone. I haven't had any. I don't have hot flashes, none, so I'm not sticking my head in the freezer anymore. My blood pressure has gone down, my cholesterol has gone down, has gone down. The speed at which these things change. I sound like one of those, infomercial things, but it's really true. I can walk 2.5 miles. That's where I'm walking now. And I had to start out very slowly. I went from not able to leave the property when I would walk my dog to walking 2.5 miles a day with no problem. I look forward to getting up and seeing the sunrise and being outside. I look forward to people taking pictures of me. I would never allow that before. I look forward to just knowing that I'll have energy at the end of the day that I didn't have before. And the diabetes is gone. I mean, I still have a way to go along with my weight, but I'm no longer diabetic, and just with food. And that's it with this program. And to actually have the answer that really works is backed on research. It's not something you're just going to pick up on YouTube by any old person. And it's not a fad diet, it's a lifestyle. And it's so easy to do once you get past that learning curve, and it's worth it too. And you have so many people to support you, to go to ask questions to. And they're right there helping you. Many, many people struggle with something, and it takes up so much of your time and space. And you speak negatively to yourself, you're not kind, and all of that just disappears. To know that I have this for the rest of my life allows me to have so much more time and room and energy to put towards other things that matter so much more. You should treat yourself like you treat the person that's most dear in your heart. And now I'm able to actually do that for myself.
So Mary, when I met her, she had just been diagnosed with diabetes, and her primary care doctor had told her that she would need to take insulin, and she didn't want to do that. And her A1C, which is a measure of what our blood sugar is like over the past 3 months, was over 12. Normal is 5.6 or less. And she said, what else can I do? So I recommended she eat a low-fat plant-based diet, and she did. And within 6 months, she had reversed her diabetes. She didn't take any medications. Her A1C was now about 5.8. Her cholesterol dropped. She lost over 50 pounds. And when I met her, she could barely walk. She would just be limited to walking in her yard. And now she was walking over 2 miles a day. And her vision improved. So it was just really amazing. And all this without any medication. So. And well, Loretta made all these great recipes from the book. Thank you, Loretta, for doing all that hard work. And I'll just stop right there and thank you all for coming out tonight. And we can talk about whatever else comes up in questions or anything else. Yeah.
I'm very interested as to, hearing the Eat Lancet strong recommendations as to how this is penetrating into the medical community. Is it being taught in medical schools? Is vibrancy that you brought to us this evening, are all departments of medicine equally cognizant about the eat healthier and live healthier mandate, or is it slow
Yeah,
to those halls of academia?
I really wish I could say, yes, it's changed how we teach medical students and residents, but unfortunately, that change isn't happening fast enough. Most medical schools are still teaching the traditional way. Here's a disease, here's a drug, here's a surgery, here's a procedure, off you go. And if you have problems with that, I have other drugs I can give you. That's really the approach. It's really not a proactive approach of diet and lifestyle. There's more awareness. There are some people that are trying to change things, but it's not nearly moving at the pace at which it should, unfortunately. Yeah. Mhm.
One of the surprising things on one of your slides was the environmental impact of shellfish.
Yeah.
Why shellfish? I mean, they don't burp and fart. They,
Right.
So
Well-
why shellfish?
Well, So shellfish, remember, there's still, a lot of this is happening on farms. It's not happening naturally in the water. So it's taking up resources. They still need to add feed or whatever fish eat to it. It's changing the landscape as you do this. It's actually even more complex than that. And there's a terrific documentary on the fish industry. It's a Seaspiracy. I strongly recommend watching that if you haven't.
Seaspiracy.
There are so many nuances to it and how it's being done. Unfortunately.
Yeah, I have a quick question. What do you think about the processed things like Impossible Burgers and Impossible Meats and things like that? Because I don't like processed food.
Yeah.
And I know that that's a very popular substitute for hamburger or whatever.
Yeah, so does everyone know what we're talking about? Impossible or Beyond Burger? It's what I call the fake meats. So what is their nutrition profile like, right? So what these companies are trying to do is create a burger that's made of plants that will taste like meat and have a nutrition profile similar to that, but without the environmental impact. Now, unfortunately, so there are pros and cons. The good part is they do have a lower environmental footprint. That goes without saying. And they're not cruel to the animal. So we've got that. But how are they for our health? I am not a fan. And I'll tell you why. It's because they are very high in fat, and especially saturated fat. They often use coconut oil or palm oil. And I forget which one, I think it's Beyond, who has now said they're stopping the use of coconut or palm oil, and they're using olive oil, which is better, but it's still a lot of fat. They don't have much fiber. They're very high in sodium, and they're very calorically dense. Is it better for the environments and the animals? Yes. Is it better for us? Yes, in the sense it has no cholesterol. It doesn't have the hormones that those other burgers have, but it's not as healthy as a black bean and sweet potato burger, or a chickpea burger. So it's not ideal, but it is better than the meat alternatives. Yeah.
Real quick, Mary online, Mary Rooker has a question. Isn't eutrophication also called dead zone?
Is what?
Isn't eutrophication also called dead zones?
That sounds, yeah, I mean, I think that's right. Yeah, you're creating these water areas that are not usable anymore, and many animals do die there. Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, I get the great little video that you showed, and she had all these positive impacts. What is it physiologically that's happening internally, or what is it about the plant-based food that is allowing that to happen? Is the less salt, fat, sugar thing, or are there hormones, vitamins, minerals? What is it in plant-based foods that allows for that?
Yeah.
Or is it what's not there?
That's going away.
Hmm.
Go ahead.
It's what?
The lipids in your muscle fibers that are going away.
Mhm.
So then your body is less insulin resistant, correct? Or it's improved. Your insulin
Yeah.
resistance is-
Yeah, so that is correct too, and I'll get into that. So let's just compare the nutrient profile of animal products to plant products, okay? So generally speaking, plant foods are low in fat and animal products are high in fat, okay? Animal products, generally speaking, have no fiber. That's because animals have no fiber, like we have no fiber. On the other hand, plants are full of fiber. That's what gives the apple the crunch, the carrot the crunch. That's why a leaf, when you snap it in half, you feel that rigidity. So plants are full of fiber. So there's that. The other thing is plants naturally have no cholesterol, whereas animal products all have cholesterol because they use cholesterol in their bodies like we do. So if you have a food that is high in fat and has no fiber, its caloric density will be quite high. On the other hand, if you have plant foods which are high in fiber, low in fat, their caloric density is quite low. So people are generally consuming fewer calories, but not by choice. They're not, what I mean by that is it's not a conscious effort. They're not sitting there and in our research studies, they're not sitting there and counting calories and saying, I'm gonna go into, you know, a 200 or 500 calorie deficit. It's happening naturally because of that, but they feel just as satisfied, if not more. So there's that fewer calories, less fat, no cholesterol, and more fiber. But then there's other stuff that all these nutrients plants have. So think of like your fruits and vegetables as these colorful shields of vitamins and minerals that we're getting that we don't get from animal products. So that reduces inflammation in the body. That reduces our susceptibility to infection. And then to what you were saying about the muscles and fat is that when we consume foods that are high in fat, it impairs our insulin from doing its job. So we become insulin resistant. This is one of the reasons why I don't like these Beyond or Impossible meats, is because they're still high in fat. So I know I tell people, don't eat that stuff, just make your own burger. It'll cost less, it'll be better for you. So when people eat less fat, their insulin sensitivity improves, their blood sugars go down. But then we think there's a whole other thing that's going on, which is happening in our gut, where we have trillions of bacteria that live in our gut. They eat what we eat. They outnumber our cells. You know, we're only 10% of our cells are human cells. The rest belong to these microbes that live in our gut. So they eat what we eat. And when we eat plant foods, the bacteria that are helpful to us, their numbers go up. The bacteria that don't help us, their numbers go down. And that is playing a huge role in all of this too. So it's happening at so many levels that we can't attribute it to any one thing.
Thank
you. Yeah.
Not quite sure how to phrase this, but when you're talking about air quality, it seems to me that if you live in an area with very poor air quality, there's very little you can do to affect what's going to happen to your lungs. But would your diet give you a significant advantage if you have to stay there than if you could escape?
Yeah, well, absolutely. And you're right. There are people in the world that live in substandard air quality most of the time, and they can't control that, you know? But they can control their own diet. And when people eat plant foods, all these chronic diseases go down. So they can improve their diabetes or reverse it. They can improve their asthma. They can improve their allergies. They reduce their risk of cardiovascular disease and stroke and cancer. And those are still the leading causes of death, even with poor air quality. They just get accelerated. So now while air quality is accelerating it, our diet is decelerating it. So we are helping ourselves. Yeah.
So you would, may I ask, just in terms of protein sources, then you just automatically beans and rice and things like that, so it wouldn't be plant-based. And that provides sufficient enough. I mean, it does for like half the world's population, but
So your question's about protein.
it is.
Yeah, well, let's just talk about that darn protein, because everyone thinks we are protein deprived.
Yeah.
Right? Isn't that the messaging we're getting?
From the meat industry.
Yeah, and who's peddling that message?
Yes, exactly.
The industry is, because who has been selling us all this awful food?
Yeah.
The industry has, but they're not gonna say, oh, I'm sorry, we sold you this unhealthy food. We're gonna say, look, you just weren't getting enough protein. So take your bag of chips and I'll add some protein to it, and now it's healthy. That's the message. So let's talk about how much protein do we need. So what is your guess? What percentage of our calories should come from protein every day? What do you think? let's throw a number,
20%?
20%, okay, any other guesses?
5.
5,
10.
10, yeah, 10.
Oh.
10, that's all we need. Only 10% of our calories should come from protein. So remember that power plate slide I showed you? So fruits are about 5% protein. So if you just eat fruits, you're not gonna get enough protein. How about vegetables? Vegetables are 10 to 50% protein. So even onions, which nobody thinks of onions as a health food, they're 10% protein. How about whole grains? Like brown rice or quinoa or oats. Those are about 10 to 15% protein. So you could just sit there and eat a bowl of rice or pasta and you would still get your protein, okay? And then what about beans and legumes, like lentils and beans and tofu? Yeah, really high, 20 to 50%. So unless we're eating fruits only, we are not gonna be protein deprived. Now, on the other hand, if people are eating meat, like chicken or beef, they're getting about 50% protein. Well, that sounds good, except we don't need it. We don't need that much protein. And we're not just getting protein, we're getting a lot of cholesterol and a lot of fat with it too. And we're getting no fiber. So nobody needs to worry about protein.
Yeah, do you think that argument is going by the wayside? Because that was the biggest one for the longest time. And, you know, you would explain, you know, you're not seeing anybody dropping dead of not enough protein, but you're seeing people dropping dead of heart attacks and
Yeah.
everything from meat. But I mean, I was with a group a couple years ago, and I brought up the idea that, you know, it's the meat industry that's doing this. And they were shocked. They go, I never heard that before. So is that out there more now?
Well, I mean, I think unfortunately, it's much easier to tell people eat more protein than to say eat more fiber, which is what people really need. Because where does fiber come from? Plants. There's not much money to be made in the plant industry, but it's easier to say eat more protein, eat more meat, eat more dairy, eat more chicken. And those, you know, those industries have very strong lobbying groups.
Yes, yeah.
So, but there's no one really out there lobbying for carrots and both. Yeah.
Big veg.
Yeah, there's just not, it's just not a big money maker, right? So that, yeah, so there are a lot of competing interests. So unfortunately, the message is getting diluted.
I think I've read, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, please.
I think I read somewhere that even a high protein plant-based diet increases insulin resistance.
Well,
Is that, am I wrong about that?
I think it depends. I would worry less about the protein, but the fat content. So if someone, often if people are eating a high protein diet, they may also be eating a lot of fats with it. So some people will say, people are still really scared of carbs. You know, they don't, by carbs, I mean grains. They don't want to eat grains. So I'll see these plant-based eaters who are like, well, I gotta eat nuts for protein. And I'm like, no, you don't need nuts for protein. That's gonna mess with your diabetes because they're high in fat. Well, we need some nuts. We don't need too many of them if we're looking to lower blood sugar. So I think it gets conflated. Sometimes the high protein is coming with high amounts of fat. But if you're eating more protein, but it's coming with carbohydrates and fiber, it's usually not gonna be a problem.
Yeah, so how are people studying children from infancy up to puberty on diet like this? Is there enough studies that have been produced that?
Yeah, so this is a common concern, you know, do children need animal products to grow normally? And the answer is they do not. This has been well established. Children from infancy through adolescence do great on plant-based diet. In fact, they do better. They don't develop as many allergies or asthma. Teenagers don't develop acne. They grow well, they sleep well. So there's usually not an issue at all.
It seems like that's one of the ways the meat industry seeks to penetrate at the earliest age groups.
They do.
Guilting parents about, oh, your child's not gonna develop normally if it doesn't have animal protein regularly in its diet.
Yeah,
I wrote about it, Dr. Spot wrote about children being able to be vegan or vegetarian from birth. So they've known for decades.
yeah. And also, we're often told they need milk, they need dairy milk. But 70% of the world's population is lactose intolerant, which is the sugar found in dairy milk. And that's because we were never meant to drink another mammal's milk.
Right.
You know, so it's just, I think there's just such marketing so strongly done. And it's effective because there's a lot of money behind it. Yeah. Other questions?
There's one in the chat about what is the role of fruit? What is the role of fruit?
Yeah, I would say eat as much fruit as you enjoy eating because fruits are great. They're like nature's perfect little candy. You don't have to prepare them. You just have to wash them and gobble them away and that's it. And if it's a banana, you don't even have to wash it, right? There's not much to do. So enjoy the fruits and I know for those of you who have diabetes, you may have been told, don't eat the fruit, please eat the fruit. It's not the fruit causing the diabetes. It's all those fats that are coming in.
Oh, on the fruit issue. Fruit juices, on the other hand, don't they give you too much of a burst of sugars?
Yes, so big difference. So when we say eat fruits, we mean the whole fruit. The fruit juice, no. Treat fruit juice like you do soda. It's no more healthier than soda. Because a fruit has 3 parts to it. It has the sugar that's naturally found in it. It has actually 4 parts. The sugar that's naturally found in it. It has the fiber, which is great. It also has starch, which is naturally found in it. And then it has water. Fruits are 90% water. So when we make fruit juice, if you ever make orange juice, you know what happens when you make orange juice in a citrus press? What gets left behind? Fiber. So when you make juice, you get the water, you get the sugar, you get the starch, but you get none of the fiber. So that's why fruit juice is not recommended, but fruits are. And also think about how many oranges would it take to make a cup of orange juice?
Wow.
Yeah, maybe 4. It depends on the orange, right? But how many of us could eat 4 oranges?
Yeah.
That might be what we eat in a day.
There's a lot of discussion now about ultra processed foods. And you know, one of the things that's dropped off of our out of our refrigerator is processed meat. But can you talk more about, you know, there's a whole lot of other chemicals that are going into our bodies that have been added from the outside.
Yeah, so I mean, ultra processed foods are basically foods that are just so processed. That I have heard one dietitian call it their food-like substances. They look remote, they look nothing like where they came from. So I think those are just a bad idea in general. They not only have they been stripped of nutrients, but a lot of chemicals and preservatives are added along the way. Their nutrition profile is usually not good. These are not food, these are usually foods that are high in calories, low in fiber, they may be high in fat, their caloric density is high. So it's best to just stay away from them. I think some of the disagreement comes about what do you call ultra processed? What do you call processed food? To some extent, everything is a little bit processed, right? Like even the brown rice we're eating, we've taken the husk off. So that's still processed, but you know, it really depends the degree to which it's processed too.
Does it say ultra processed when you're reading the ingredients?
Oh, no way.
No, I have seen it on some, and yes, where it said ultra.
Well, that would be great if they came with a label, but most of them won't.
If the ingredients have more than 3 syllables, then probably ultra processed.
Yeah.
I'll have to find that, it was one of these Indian, what do you call it? Curry.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And it said ultra processed on it, and I was like, huh.
Wow, that must have been clear. That could have been a language barrier or something.
Oh.
I've seen that with Indian food before.
Oh, you have? Yeah,
Yes.
that's where I saw it.
Yeah, cause that's something they do not wanna advertise.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, they want, you'll see things like natural.
Yeah.
Things like that, but, everything is almost, except for fresh fruits or maybe some vegetables, everything is somewhat processed, and the question is to what degree are they processed?
Right.
So we are, as a community, seeking to become far more intentional and purposeful in presenting vegan diets. Do you have any advice about what makes for successful group settings that kind of pulls people away from maybe the meals that they had when they were living in the 1950s, like I was, and into a more modern, safer, more productive, healthier design? Because there's a lot of resistance.
Yeah, how do you get people to try plant foods more and like them more? I think it's doing just what you're doing, having conversations like this, and then what Loretta did, serving the food. Nothing speaks stronger than people just eating the food, and they're like, oh, well, this isn't that different. And then it's also good to just serve people food that they're familiar with, like serve a pasta or a chili or a burger. Something, so they know the food already, so then that feels like, okay, I'll try it, serve them a vegan mac and cheese. And see what they think.
Yeah. I've been giving cooking lessons, and one of the things I like to say to people is, if you taste one dish that's vegan and you don't like it, don't say, I hate vegan food. It could be it could be the cook that was terrible. It could be the recipe that was terrible. It's just like any food that is prepared. There's good and bad cooks,
Right, I mean, that's so true, like not every pizza out there is good, right?
Right, yeah.
You wouldn't just say, oh, all pizza is awful.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's so true, that's a really good point.
I can't thank you enough. This has just been wonderful.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
This has been great.
And I do want to invite everyone to our March 14th, Climate Friendly Friday, when we have Doug Tallamy, who will be coming and talking to us about native plants, and we're not quite sure what.
He's gonna be focusing on his homegrown, national park,
Great.
idea, where he's encouraging people to turn their yards into little national parks. Obviously, there's much more to it than that, but it's mainly for habitat sustainability, wildlife.
So they can work in the yard and then come have a plant-based meal. So thanks so much.
Yeah.
And what is your
Thank you all.
book? What's your cookbook?
It's on the
Loretta
table
has
back
it.
there.
Oh, it's on the table, yeah. Very good.
How about mentioning on Sunday?
Sunday,
The
we're
act-
having, we're having, a planning meeting after the service. And we'll always have our plant-based snacks. And on the second Sunday of each month, we have our Savory Sunday, where we, offer a, plant-based entree, and kind of an upscale meal, which is a real hit. It's not just sweets or appetizers. So hope to see everyone is invited. Thank you very much. Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Tom. We
Thanks,
couldn't do
Tom.
this without you.
Thank you, Loretta, for putting this together.
Thank you all.
You were showing that. Sure.